Well, hello, creatives, community, and kind folks. Welcome to RPG with DBJ. All of you as co-hosts on this show. We love to have you here, and glad you could join us. Now, this week we've been talking about gender and actually somewhat gender politics. And strangely enough, today on this third pillar of exploration, Thursday, we are going to talk about some similar things. Now, for those who do not know, I am a huge fan of using the environment. That's why Thursdays are generally reserved for the third pillar of exploration in our tabletop role playing games. And how this time we're going to try to figure out how it could or even make it possible for it to relate to our what we were talking about gender fluidity and about sexuality and the context and all the intricacies and complexities and strangeness thereof. Um, okay, so today with exploration, we're going to talk about what I feel is how gender would even have any possible connection to exploration would be hunting and gathering. Now, of course, this is going to blend in with our social aspect, our social pillar, quite a bit. But let's talk a little bit about hunting, gathering, and survival in our tabletop role playing games first, just to give us a little context, get us on the same page, and then we'll move on from there and get into the more heady stuff. So, unfortunately, fifth edition, being the world's most popular role playing game, has done itself a disservice, I feel, by putting a lot of easy buttons, by relegating survival itself to the back burner. They've actually taken survival and the idea of the complicated, interactive journey of going across these vast landscapes or through other dimensions or traveling on airships and the whole nine yards, and placed it into the encumbrance region of role playing in which it's hand waved away. And so I think they've done themselves a little disservice. And so the idea of a community being able to hunt and gather, that player characters must set up camps and hunt for game and gather materials, whether it's firewood or building materials, or find clean water sources, pick berries, find uh, tubers and whatnot, fruits and veggies and mushrooms and all kinds of things. While I do understand that some players are like would be rolling their eyes at this point, going like, I don't want to have to count rations. I are you expecting me to have to keep track of my caloric intake each day or something? No, 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 no. But I feel like it swung too far. The dial has swung too far to one side. Uh, Wayne's like, yeah, I agree. Many aspects of 5e are easy mode. Totally see the OSR thing, and in a way, that's we kind of understand where the embrace of the OSR uh, comes in because of that easy button. Like, oh, good berry. Why do I need to have rations? I can do this every day and get enough for my people. Create food and water or purify food and water. No big deal. Hey, I'm a ranger. I can never get lost. Or what's the other? I think it's a background feature. Like I can find food and water nutrients easily for myself and like five other people, no problem. And it's like, well, I think they kind of, I believe the auto successes are not interactive. They're not buttons and levers to push and pull. Even if success is guaranteed, sometimes having a dial to turn, like, how successful were you? How long did it take you? What did you leave a trail behind, or did someone get hurt along the way, or things like that? That there are no dials to move, and so with the least amount of interaction, you get the least amount of context and creativity with it, I feel. Uh, Kylie says, remember when Rangers had to pick a favorite environment so they could only use their cool survival skills in familiar environments? Yep, that was the old ranger, like I'm a mountain ranger and I'm a desert ranger, and I feel like I would have even taken rangers further to go like pick weather. Like I'm a winter ranger. It doesn't matter where it's snowing, whether it's in a city or a mountainside or something. I'm a winter ranger. Another one might be like I'm a super hot, humid tropical ranger. And as long as it's hot and humid, I'm cool. Like I would even go so far as to do that as well. It's a shame, but uh, unfortunately, with game design, you only have two modes, and that is to not include it, go OSR, and have to figure out how to include such a thing. Like, hey, I am playing strict OSR with four classes like fighter, wizard, cleric, and thief. How do I make my fighter a survivalist? Or you include everything, fifth edition, and then you have to tell players, no, these are the things we're not going to include in the game. No, you can't get good berry. No, you don't have automatic survival, and that kind of thing. And I think saying no hurts players' interactions, unfortunately. Mike says, as one with too many homebrew worlds, Embry, just pronounce it like Ember. Oh, it's like Ember. Okay, thank you. Is a savage world where the roles of hunter and prey switch a lot. Can you gather berries? Sure. So are the beasts. They gather beasts like towering over the PCs and going like, "Ooh, their foreheads are nice and ripe and juicy. Let me pick their skulls off of their bodies and put them in a little sack on my hip." But yes, I, to me, just the idea of the hunting and gathering part could be automatic. We know our players are going to hunt for something, gather things together. We know they're going to survive and they're going to do it. But the journey involved in it, tribal peoples have they hunt down rhinos and elephants. They take their poison spear or javelin, jam it into the rear end of the elephant runs off. And they might have to travel 3, 4, 5 days just to track this damn thing down, right? Through exhaustion and using poisons and traps and navigating over the environment, or sneaking and trying to follow along with herd animals, or follow bird migrations and all other kinds of things, and don't even talk about fishing of all kinds, whether it's through netting or using rods. And what kinds of fish are you going after? Salmon swimming upstream, or going after lobster? And are you diving for oysters? So on and so, like all that kind of stuff. I think we're missing that part because that can be kind of fun. Anyway, Mike says, with dinosaurs a reality, I've had parties looking for a place to rest for the night and have to deal with giant constrictor snakes and velociraptors just to bed down for the night. Yeah, intelligent survivalists are probably going to end up wanting to take shelter in the same places the natural environment would. Mm-mm-mm. Mm-mm-mm. Uh, I know Wayne was having a little private conversation, but I love urban rangers. I love the idea of urban rangers. That's awesome. Let's see. Mike says steel is super rare. Same thing in Dark Sun as well. Steel is super rare, so most weapons and armor are bone, leather, and stone. Yep. Horn, same thing like bone, but horn is basically like the exposed horns and claws and things of other monsters. Using hide and whatnot, like leather and scales and stuff, is awesome. Players know ahead of time that getting from place to place means everything is a risk. It's a survival heavy setting where wits and ingenuity are highly rewarded. And again, what a great way to reward players for engaging in the environment. Maybe they like what we would consider classic dungeon delving. Instead, maybe they find that magic item, or they find those trinkets and things like that within the natural environment of the world itself. Instead of finding a rod of power, maybe they find nectar in a flower, or a stream of golden fluid, although that might be a sleeping giant having fun at the PC's expense. But you get the point, right? Like whatever. They might do all kinds of things, and I think that's awesome. Dead Man says, I knew a guy who ran an AD&D second edition game where he had an expanded skill list that made each environment a different skill and each weapon was a different skill, etc. He had 10 pages of skills. That sounds like skill locking to me, but I like the effort. Mm-mm-mm. Yeah, I mean, like Kylie says, I loved the Urban Ranger variant. Hilarious to make one fear the wilds. A ranger that fears the wilds. That's awesome. That makes perfect sense. Yep. Mm-mm-mm. Yeah, I don't like skill locking. Mike says, having played 2E, I'm very familiar with the. Are you trained? No, then here's a penalty. Yeah, yeah. Skill locking. It's having so many skills that there's no way to pick the right blend of skills to become the character that you want. You know, sci-fi does this a lot with scientific skills. It's like, how many weapon skills are there? 3. You know, how many science skills? 28. You're like, well, why does it cost me more to be a astrophysicist and a chaostician and a medical doctor and and then they're like, oh, you don't have geology, too bad. You're like, what? Anyway, all right, so hunting and gathering. Now, already, I think even if we're in a world where um, I think it lends itself more towards a tribalistic world, or at least the players are thrown into a situation and setting where they have to survive that way. And yeah, Kylie, I'm with you there. Yeah, with the non-weapon proficiencies, yeah, narrowing it down. Yeah. Yeah. It's like, okay, guys. Yeah, Gygax saying, okay, guys, imagine your hero could do a thing that wasn't swinging a weapon. Like, yeah, that's the whole point. Um, Now, when it comes to one of the things that we often don't, because it's been relegated to the side so much, that when it comes to hunting and gathering, it's not just a matter of finding the food and just going, okay, well, you found the food. It's the travel to get to where the food source is, whether you're hunting down wild animals or setting up traps, or the animal, if you're talking about a meat source or whatever, the animal in question is far away from where your camp is, or having to grab all your stuff, travel along the pathways to find the very animal you want, and then setting up camp there. And then all of the things that happen afterwards, the entire aftermath. If it's a very large animal or beast, you're going to have to render it in some kind of way. You're going to have to cut it up and smoke it and get the bone from it and the skin, and that itself might take a might be far more than one individual's particular skill set, as well as the fact that, like many animals that go on a hunt, even predators and such, the act of even killing another animal might make them vulnerable to aspects on the outside world, especially if the weather starts to change, or they hunt their prey down, but now they're in a territory that doesn't belong to them, that's been marked by other predators, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of animals burn a lot of energy to hunt, and so like a cheetah that can only run so fast for so long in short bursts, there's a lot of energy you have to burn, and after a while, it's like if any failure in that, you're like, oh no, I'm not going to be able to eat today, or heck, if I eat today, that's going to put me into a lethargic state, like alligators do, and some big cats do, and stuff like that. Yep. Mike says, if I take fault with 5e, it's the catch-all for the history skill. Amen. Amen to that. It counts as history, regional lore, science, geography, sociology, political science, etc. It should have been, I almost feel like the word history should have been called knowledge. But even if it was called the knowledge skill, it's like, maybe you could have, I feel like they could have thrown that skill into backgrounds and class features, so at least you get like a double bump. So, but I've always defaulted to any player class and background that a player comes up with. They automatically have knowledge of whatever it is that they came from. Are you playing Fightor who has no knowledge skills? Well, you probably know forensics. You know when things are killed, you know what they look like. If you're a fighter, you're familiar with maybe if and you came from the military, you probably have like a military science background. So I've always defaulted to PCs having expertise in their field, skill or no skill. So whatever. Mike says, continues, for Ember, something I made clear was that hunting itself attracts other predators. Exactly. When you kill a beast and field dress it, skin it, butcher it, it will attract others. Blood scent, if you will. Absolutely. One of the things I think that's removed from assuming auto success, automatic survival, never getting lost, finding water and other nutrients, automatically setting up camp. I think the TER of it has been removed. Time, energy, resources. So, in other words, it takes time to field dress an animal. Okay. And sure, maybe there are people who are playing games and they're like, look, I don't really like violence against innocent things. Like I'm a vegetarian, and in our games we don't do that. That's perfectly fine as well in your group. But as far as like the 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 tribalistic nature of, hey, we're not going to use and abuse the environment, but our people do need to eat, that in and of itself attracts, there's an aftermath to that. You've just spilled blood. And that, listen, we all know predators can smell blood, or there are many predators that can smell blood miles away in our own real world. In a fantasy world, you have things flying through the air, griffins sniffing in the air and smelling it on the wind. You've got like those boulets, those land sharks underneath the ground going like, that smells pretty good. You've got dwarves underground pulling tubers from the ceiling going like, oh, here we go with adventurers dumping blood down into our realm again or something. Like, I mean, you've got all kinds of things going on. So absolutely, absolutely. And uh, not only that, but how many times have we seen player characters kill things, take the blood, I'm going to wipe it on my cloak or my leg and keep on fighting? And it's like, you maybe you not might not want to do that. You don't want to walk around with bloody hands and weapons, even though it makes you look like a badass with like the classic like blood stain splashed across the face with like the dual weapon fighter or something. That looks good in a photograph, but in reality, you might want to wash that off. So at a close by stream or something. So I think time, energy, as far as like exhaustion, fatigue, um, the act of hunting itself is tiring and doesn't. The act of actually hunting prevents you from resting. And then, of course, there's resources. How many arrows are you using? How much wood are you burning? There are other, you've got all this rope or hemp or fibers that you're using to tie up or smoke things or whatever. So you're using resources while you're trying to gain them as well, moving over and over again. And so I think we forgot about that. We'll get into the gender part because it's 20 minutes. We haven't even gotten to that part yet. But let me get to my co-host and then we'll delve into this. Wayne says environment as a monster encounter is missing. Yeah. A raging snowstorm can put one in mortal danger. Giant hail, tornadoes, hurricane at sea. Much can be done. Side note, I was a contributing writer to Level Up 5e over at N World, which will be the Kickstarter hopefully in August, fingers crossed. And yes, we made environmental encounters like monster stat blocks. And unfortunate, not the good part about it for me, which is the bad part for player characters, is no, you can't draw your sword and hack away at a snowstorm. It's not an elemental. You're going to have to use your skills and your wits and creativity to navigate through the environment. And they're statted out. They have certain consequences. They have, we're going to have experience points listed for each one of them. They are listed by tier levels and everything. So yeah. mm, 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 mm. Sorry, I read another comment. Sorry. Mike says, I know it's not a thing for today, but if I ever ran a modern 5e setting, I'd add things like science, computer, and other skills not related to history. I would too. I don't I don't think adding 57 skills, but I would say half a dozen to a dozen would fit. I think no more than that. I don't think you would want more than that. Kylie's like, I get a little familiar home pang when you say water. Yes, yes. There's a side note. There's a gentleman in Canada that is a does some great YouTube videos uh, um, about linguistics, and often appears on Wired. And yeah, the whole HBO Max here in the States aired a television show called Mayor of Easttown. It's like 7 episodes, 8 episodes length about a murder investigation in upstate Pennsylvania. And yes, the actors had to learn how to say water because that's how I pronounce it, water, water, not WATE or water. It's water. So yeah, it's a tri-state Pennsylvania, Jersey, Delaware-ish thing. Yeah, thank you so much for that, man. Oh, oh, I really appreciate it. Mike says, if you want to run a savage survival setting, remember that strength has value. Not only will athletics have greater value, but if you want to lift, carry, drag dead game, Dex won't do it. You are so right. So right. Yeah, and like Mike says, beware of adding. So beware using strength as a dump stat. A lot of people use strength as a dump stat because Dex is so powerful as a stat. So many times. Kylie, you and I, absolutely. I can only say water. It's for life. Yeah. Instead of going down to the shore, it's like Donna Shore. Where are you going this weekend, Donna Shore? Uh, Kylie says they should need a high constitution too, or that strength is going to start getting dinged until a long rest. Yep. I love that idea. All right, so let's get into the gender part. Now, listen, short episode today. There's not much that can be said about gender, but I do want to read out. I do want to read out a comment made by left in the Discord by Zamara, and mentions about let's get the comment out on the table here and then decipher it. Okay, so says, here we go. Zamara says, I think I will try to pull together some idea fodder for tomorrow's episode. So I'm going to voice the inherent issue with gender, sex, sexuality, sexual expression, and gender identity. It says, am I missing anything? I don't think so. As I see it in the third pillar, they're all inherently second pillar focused. I absolutely agree. Otherwise, we are talking about set pieces that lack context until the second pillar is introduced. Of course, there's always an exception to the rule, and I found one. All right. The environment, a long forgotten temple of a deity or deities or wizards, most likely a trickster deity or a twin deity, like male female twins, or a deity of strict gender roles, or maybe a gender fluid, talk about a trickster deity that flows between them. Anyway, goes on to say, have there be areas that can only be accessed by one gender or another. I would include, because this is second pillarish, to have tribal peoples that only invite people of specific genders, maybe. Anyway, it goes on to say that forces your gender to another before you access it, complete with traps, quote unquote traps, set by previous adventurers or maybe intelligent creatures that have or they have explored or are exploring it, designed to swap your gender within those areas, maybe puzzles based on the experiences that come with being those genders in that situation, and artifacts that focus on these themes. It would take a fair amount of work to make. I definitely agree. Well, work, but I'm sure it could be done. So the point of that, I love that, Zamar. Just the time. Ooh, perfect timing there, Z. So what Zamar is bringing up is that the exploration part of this third pillar, hunting, gathering supplies, and again, let's talk about the gathering part. Maybe there are good berry bushes in Ember, but there's giant thorny bushes that might poison you or something. Or heck, getting eggs out of a nest of any animal is pretty dangerous no matter what you go after, right? Getting berries and roots and seeds and bark and fibers and maybe even what is it? The aloe plant, helps with cuts and burns and bruises and whatnot. Maybe there are the honey, getting honey from beehives, or there are salves that can be made from plant materials, maybe to cover the skin, or what we've seen people milk cobras for materials for poisons and such. There can be all these kind of things that are out there that the players may have to gather together. And I think it's, despite the fact that some players might not like this, I like the idea of players needing to gather multiple materials together to do a thing. Hey, I want a fireball spell. Well, instead of casting the spell out of a book, maybe you have to get that bat guano, and you have to get sulfur, and you have to get you have to dry materials in the sun for 3 days before something. But this goes to what Zamara is talking about, that the second pillar, the social interaction part of it, might be very intrinsic in terms of the what the players are doing and how they're doing it. For example, the players. I would love it if the players have to help maybe a community survive. So the players are the adventurers. They're going out there in the wild, but they've got to bring all these materials back to their local village or people, or there's a traveling caravan or something to help them out. And socially, someone might look at the players like, why are you gathering materials? And they're like, because we need to. And they might look at them like, that's a lady's job. Like, you should be with us as hunters. And the PCs are going like, I could care less about your gender roles. I'm going to do what's necessary, right? Your male druid casting a spell to create a bush of good berries might be looked at as odd with another community. So interaction with other groups as they're moving along in this world might be, they might have positive and negative outlooks based on the activities they're making versus the activities of the rival faction or what have you. And so that may have a lot to do with it. Also, when it comes to challenges, like for example, maybe the PCs need to get yet one more clue from a local tribe, but they're like, we're not going to do it unless you go along on a hunt with us, or you're not going to do it unless you join us in we're going to have a festival or a gathering where we gather all of our every person that comes, or every group that comes, brings with them their idealized food source. Maybe it's a berry, or maybe they are certain kinds of fruits and vegetables, or certain kind of game, and they bring these as gifts. And so maybe the challenge is certain groups represent certain things. Like maybe storytelling is only done by the air quotes females in the group, and the female in the group might be the barbarian. And the guy might be the bard, and they're like, oh. The bard's trying to whisper to barbarians here, all right, follow what I'm saying, and the barbarian's trying to sing off key and whatnot. Like you could have those. It might not be, how do I say, prejudicial, or these gender roles from other groups might not be the type of, hey, we hate you for doing this thing. It might just be an expected interaction. Like the PCs might get together and go, all right, listen, we're going to go over the mountain range. Guys over there, they're really big on this gender specific thing. Who's going to portray what? Or, hey, I've got magic that'll change me into this other thing. Or there might be like Zamara brings up, maybe there is a glen, a magical glen, and if you're a man, you'll just go right through it. You won't see anything. But if you're female, like the dryads or the nereids or sirens or something, will call you to allow you to enter into a particular region. And so you could have these different threads that you can pull in the environment. And of course, this week we're specifically talking about gender. I'm not suggesting that you should do this. I'm just talking about the fact that you can do this. And it might even be going the opposite direction. This might open the eyes of the closed-minded groups that are out there and you might even find NPCs or allies that are like that are like, oh wow, I didn't know, we never thought of doing that before. Maybe we could do a thing. And then you, of course, have drama when maybe someone who has broken out of their gender role tries to reinsert themselves back into their society, or a PC maybe has left their tribe and moved on from their specified roles. And now they might have been exiled, or they're not wanted back, or maybe there's a political faction that's like, please don't come back because you're going to remove me from power. Something. Pelorus says, swap the female and get catcalled by the builder kobolds. Take 5 points of mental damage. Catcalled. A little vicious mockery there. Yeah. Who knows? Maybe. Hey P. Mike says, yeah, the roles of hunter and gatherer were gender defined in many cultures. This may have to do with the population of that culture. In a low population group, the roles may blur due to necessity. I didn't bring it up. There was a Yale paper that I read that mentioned that actually gender roles were quite blurred based on the population of the group. You know, a few dozen, everybody did everything. But as the gender roles were defined simply by necessity, not because you were supposed to do a thing. It was the ladies had to breastfeed, and if the ladies were running around with kids on their back, it doesn't really make much sense. The dude, the guy's unencumbered in that sense, or the guy is just like, listen, ladies, I I don't think you're any less capable, but I don't have to breastfeed kids, so I'm going to go out and go hunting. You guys stay here when we bring back materials. And by the way, if we have to pick up and move, you ladies tell us when it's time for us to move, whether you think we've um, overstayed our welcome. You know, whether we have to follow the herd or follow the bird migrations, or the seasons are changing, or too many plants. We've overgathered in this region. We're going to have to move, so we'll follow your lead. Something like that. And a lot of times, it might just be a necessity. If the guys are out hunting, maybe the ladies are just in a local group educating the group, so maybe they become, so air quotes, the educated role, gender role, simply because of proximity. You know, Kyla says, "Oh my God, that scene sounds so cute." DPJ, make the female role, make the female role that she has to make dex checks to handle delicate ritual items like a tea set, oh, like pouring tea, or uh, a ritualized cultural greeting or expression of who you are and what you're doing, whether it's singing or dancing or serving food, much like I'm going to call out the stereotypical pouring of tea in Japanese culture. And I'm saying stereotypical because I know I'm doing it wrong, but it is, do you hold it with one hand or two hands? Do you pour the tea all the way up to the top of the glass? Who do you serve first? How is the meal served? Is it smoked and cooked and like barbecued, or is it sautéed? Is it hung out to dry, like, or something like? There might be ways in which something is presented. Maybe there are even stories told over a great meal. Like each group, there's 5 tribes that get together and they're supposed to tell these great stories, and they expect the women to tell the stories, but a guy stands up because he's the bard, and he's like, "I'm gonna tell a story," and everyone's like, "You know how the jowls get to moving when people are offended, like, what's happening?" And then this guy starts telling this great story, and everybody gets drawn into it. And maybe there's like a mage in the background making like the fire dance with imagery or something, and that could involve like sleight of hand skill and maybe acrobatic skill to look like you're performing a dance. The performance skill might need to be used. Maybe history checks to call about the ancestral, to remember facts from ancestors that others are like, "Oh, I didn't know you remembered my ancestors," or something like that. And have these like, you need so many successes to engender the help of these other groups. So yeah, you could do a lot of things. Now I understand we're talking about the third pillar of gaming, but the second pillar has a lot to do with it. And I definitely agree with Zamara's comment. Like this is more, interacting with other NPCs than not. Although you could have spirits, fey creatures, deities, warlock patrons out there that are far more close-minded in their nature. Fey creatures probably more close-minded in a playful sense. Like they might even look at the group with the female barbarian and the male bard and go like, you know what? Only you ladies are invited to the dance, right? And for the sole purpose of making them uncomfortable or something. Yeah. Mike Gould says, so a low population or isolated group are less likely to give a damn about gender roles. I definitely agree with that. Food is food. Work's work. There's less space for the restrictions or expectations of others. And as a matter of fact, it might be like, for example, we've seen, despite the fact that we're talking tribal, primitive peoples, we've seen artwork from them of super intricate design. Native peoples here in the United States uh, have there's beadwork that is intricate and so detailed. There are I'm gonna I have a terrible mind for knowing how to call things, but in the Middle East, there are people who design screens so that the heat doesn't come through. They're like screens, but they're all intricately designed. I'm thinking of like Persian carpets. Come on, guys! I know that you guys know of a number of uh, absolutely detailed materials that are created by the greatest artists, and so it might not even be a matter of, hey guys, sit down and start helping us weave baskets. It might be, hey, sit down and help me braid my hair or paint things on my skin, or hey, you hunted down a griffin. That's a great a great challenge. We're going to give you a tattoo, or we're going to brand you, or do some scarification to mark you as a griffin rider or a griffin hunter or something like that. That might give a player character a special ability, like feather fall after every once a day and regain it after a short rest or something like that. And they have like a bird's feather on their back or their shoulder or their forearm or something like that. And but it's only possible to do the thing if you have, like, again, sleight of hand, performance skill or something. And the guys might be like, I'm a hunter, blah 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 blah. I'm a manly man. And you're like, well, you better sit your ass down and weave these baskets because we're going to need them for later on. Or it's um, a, a coworker of mine retired and moved to Thailand, and says that the group gets together to make where he lives. They make these super long nets before rainy season because the rivers will overflow. And when the rivers overflow, they string these long nets across these fields so that when the river overflows, the fish through will bump into the nets and they can catch the fish. But they all have to work together to weave these nets together because they get holes in them and they get tattered and they wear out. And the whole community is like dozens upon dozens of people just sitting out there having conversations, weaving nets together. So a lot of that could be needed. Let's see. Zamara says there was an interesting video by Lacey Green that I will share into the Discord comment section after this is over that can help a DM color a culture or town on why a city might have its roles. Ooh, okay, all right, and I'll listen to that at work. Um, Palora mentions I need to do a tea ceremony in meat space. That actually sounds adorable. I'll have to research some of them and see what different cultures do. You know, it can also actually, I don't know how detailed you'd want to get, but we all know that even when we don't understand each other's languages, food is incredibly diplomatic when it comes to different cultures. Um, Inviting someone into your home, feeding them your food, and the other person, the response to that is the other person partaking of that food is very, very diplomatic. And so, not only what you feed someone, but how you feed them, and then of course the person who receives that gift, how they eat. Like for example, in different cultures, it's been a long time, but I remember going to a restaurant, and I don't even think you can even do this any longer. But not only was the food laid out family style, meaning all the food in the center and everyone gets what they want, but you ate with your fingers. and you reached over and grabbed things off other people's plates, and you put your hand in the food and you put it on someone else's plate, and that might throw some a, as Americans, that might throw a bunch of us off if you're not used to an individual taking their hands, picking up some food, throwing it on your plate, and then reaching in your plate and taking something, right? But that might be a very common thing, or maybe just beginning a meal where everyone sips out of a big mug of like broth, hot broth or something, and everyone takes a sip out of it beforehand. And so those little things might differentiate different factions or groups, and the players might need to learn what they are, or even perform those ceremonies properly, or at least not embarrass themselves. Yeah. Mm-mm-mm. Mike says, raised by a single and indigenous mom, I was trained at a young age that gender roles have squat to do with work. Yeah. If there was something to do, go on and do it. Yeah, hell yeah. And I know it doesn't sound fun, but player characters, oh, I don't know, having to wash clothing or make soap or dry goods, make dried goods or smoke meats. That's a time crunch. And during those times, you have a lot of social interaction. And also, while you're doing those things, again, we go back to the once you kill game, that blood scent goes out. So now you have like, okay, well, while you're doing that, I'm going to go on patrol to make sure other predators aren't following us. Or, hey, I'm going to do a pass without trace skill spell function because we traveled like 16 kilometers to find out where we need to get some safety, and we were doing at a fast pace. We need to go back and cover our tracks because someone or something might trace us back here. And so the idea of like that tension between always needing to move, staying still, time crunching, that kind of stuff, maybe even finding game, hiding it, leaving, being a decoy, leading people away, having battle with them just to have to come back to do something, or NPCs and monsters stealing what you found. You know, oh, you found an oasis? Get the hell out of out of the oasis. It's ours now. Or, oh, you guys are dragging back, I don't know, 500 stone of meat. We're going to steal that meat from you. We're not going to kill you. We want to knock you down, push you away, steal the meat, and run off. That griffin that the PC domesticated or something. Maybe other griffins are like, "Where's our baby griffin? Oh, there's meat. Let's fly down there and grab some." Mike says, "How one eats food, who eats first, when you eat, and when you fast are all cultural expectations." Ooh, fasting. I forgot about fasting. The types of foods you eat. Isn't there is an African tribe that is known to only eat meat from cattle, and they survive by feeding their. I don't know if they do this any longer. The Maasai, I think. I don't know. I know I'm wrong, but I know my mind is going towards the right direction. But they survive by eating off of the animals that are around them when we didn't even bring up animals. So yeah. Deadman says henna tattoos are basically a temporary tattoo, often used in India. Yes, I don't know the cultural distinction, but I've seen that plenty of times where the henna tattoos are placed on the backs and the palms of the hands and the face and such for various reasons, and that could be for extremely cultural reasons. And of course, we're playing role playing games, so lots of paladins, clerics, druids, warlocks, and all that blended together might have reasons to make themselves distinctive for various purposes, right? Like, oh, all my spells are tattoos. People who see you, they may not understand what you can do, but they understand why you have those markings. Like, oh, you are a druid because your right arm is exposed and it has all these markings of various animals or something. Zamara says, as someone who worked at an upper crust restaurant until 1 month ago, DBJ is right. Some groups have their own practices that are hard to accommodate for, such as having uh, a collective food plate where everyone eats off of or grabs food from, or passing cups of fine wine around to everyone, or sitting in certain arrangements. Right, exactly. Like, um, we know that this might not be a cultural norm, but this is definitely political. who sits at the head of the table? How many arguments, how many families have been shattered because of two people getting married and having to argue over which table someone sits at? We've seen that before. Or, hey, I want to schmooze up to someone. Can you please sit me next to the individual that can get me what I want? But you have to come up with a reason why you're sitting at the table to begin with, or certain subjects you never bring up at the family table, right? What is it? Religion, politics, and money. You never those big three. You never bring up any of those three things at the table, or you get smacked down. Or uh, here in the States during Thanksgiving, there's always been the kids table. If you got a big enough family, the adults sit at one table, the kids sit at the other table. Yeah, we have a lot of that kind of stuff. Mike says, tedious or time-consuming tasks are a great time opportunity to gather rumors. Need to find out the local scuttlebutt? Go sit in white skins. Go sit in white skins or while skins are being tanned. I know what you meant by that. Yeah, go sit while skins are being tanned. Want to know who's in charge? Help with chores. Exactly. Hey, need to make wine? Roll up those pants and start stepping on those berries. Right? Yeah. Or go into the hut where all the meats are getting smoked for jerky or something, and have a conversation with the individual that's doing it. Or better yet, hey, get off your lazy ass, Hunter, and help us make an enclosure while we barbecue this meat that has to smoke for 14 hours. You lazy ass, right? There are those things, and if the dude is like, I'm big game hunter, I don't do women's work, then they're like, well, I guess you don't eat then. There is a lot of that. I remember as a kid, like, hey, you don't wash dishes, you don't eat. Mike says henna is likely a reaction to the fact that hand tattoos are difficult. Hand skin cells regenerate very quickly, making tattoos disappear or fade very quickly. Makes a perfect excuse to give a boon to a player character instead of a magic item. It's a magic tattoo that eventually fades over time. So you can give someone something, and later on as a DM, you're like, ooh, that was too powerful. Oh, sweet, it fades away. Great, they don't have it tomorrow or something like that. Oh man. Pelora says, yeah, the male head of the household sits at the head of the table in a lot of Western cultures. But then you could have a cultural difference of having round tables or no tables at all. Yep. Yep. And a tribe might understand who is in power by the way you see yourselves in comparison to them. Like that might be their cultural interaction with you. All right, we wait to see how you sit down, and whoever sits closest, it might be the one who wants to like be a sycophant, and the one who sits far away might be the most dangerous one. The one that everyone leans over to get information, that's the smart one. Like it could be that. I like that. I'll get to your comment there, Mike, in a minute. Zamar says, DBJ, you forgot the unspoken one you never bring up, lest you be a loose mouth or loose morals. Ooh, yeah, yeah. don't talk don't talk sex at all. Although there is always the funny family member that like either says the inappropriate thing or gets drunk. There here here in African American culture, we always have like Aunt Peaches and Junior, because we always have an Aunt Peaches that's like a little too touchy feely with the younger male members of the family, and she always dresses a little bit too scantily, just a little bit too much, maybe just a little too much cleavage there, Auntie. You always get that. You always get the person that just ruins the meal for everybody else or something, and the PCs, like you said, instead of doing the big game hunting thing, maybe if they sit back and just look at who they're dealing with, maybe they find that out. Like the PCs end up having a great meal with the lizard folk, half their meal still being alive or something, and swimming around in bowls of like fluid or something. Don't you want a tadpole? And the PCs are like, oh, but those lizard folk, maybe they find out some important facts, like, yeah, all the big burly hunters are there, but you know who the dangerous person is? that one lizard person there sitting in the background, all scrawny with a staff or something. They're the true power. Kylie says the cultural all-you-can-eat buffet, true egalitarianism. Yep, yep. Or a maybe the PCs think that they're up against a air quotes evil tribe, but when they find out that their leader is like, nope, our elderly, our young, our weak, they all eat first before us, and that might change their opinions. Yeah. As far as like DBJ, if it's a lizard folk dinner, don't forget the fingerberries. PCs are like crunch. Whose ring is that? That's that's a class ring. This person graduated with me, but their fingers sure do taste good. One of the player characters is like chowing down, like I don't know these barbecue fingers. I know you. I know I used to know this person, but man, everyone's like, don't pull that finger. You don't know where those fingers have been. The male PC is like, oh, I know where they've been. Yummy. Wayne says, smoked meat gave me a horrible idea. PC's invited to see how locals smoke that sweet, juicy meat they ate last night. This is when they find out the locals are cannibals and they're up next to be smoked. Yep, yep, yep. What are those old books? Well, it's How to Serve Man. Oh man. Michael says, in a setting where people sit in circles during meals, sitting back to back with someone and not eating may be a status thing. They who watch your back are your most trusted. They may not eat that time, but they get first pick at the next meal. Yep. Yep. And for the espionage players in all of us, maybe there are people who can't join the meal for whatever reason, and food is taken away. And when everyone's sitting together in a fire or a camp or a tent or a yurt or something like that, and when the food leaves, PC follows where that food is taken. And maybe there are outcasts, and someone's feeding the outcasts who shouldn't be there. At the village, but they live on the outskirts, or maybe there are prisoners somewhere that are being fed. All this has to do with food. Mike says, I know it's a touchy subject, but the role of slaves may factor into hunter-gathering setting as well. Especially if, I know this sounds terrible to say this, but especially if it is known that like indentured servitude and slavery is a thing someone can work their way out of. So, for example, maybe the hunting is done by the free hunters, but the gathering and or the processing of raw materials is done by the enslaved as well. And so maybe they're needed, or heck, we all know slavery is basically free force multiplier, right? We need, hey, us five can't do the thing, but if we get 50 people for free, we can get them to build a temple or move rocks out the way or dredge that river or something. Who cares if one of them drowns, whatnot? And so, absolutely, positively could be used as well, especially if it's done like a chain gang, or members of families are captured and forcing their freer family members to do a thing for the group, to then come back to make sure that their loved ones are not harmed, right? Hey, if you run away, they're dead. But if you stay, we will feed them and take care of them, but you got to do what we tell you. You have to go after the dinosaur. And they're like, I'm not a warrior or a hunter or something. And they're like, yeah, neither are we, but you're going to have to do it. Let's see. Zamar says, if I may, I have learned that slaves become more common once one becomes a farming society. More hands to work the fields. You need to expand your family and all that. Exactly. And maybe there's a reason in our setting that we understand. Maybe there's a need to keep moving, because all of the societies that have started to settle down may start to incorporate this slavery mentality, right, to survive. Because with a small group and the need to keep spread resources amongst everyone, maybe they go, you know what, if we could just reduce our resources and get more people, yeah. And then so the PCs and everyone that they know are like, our asses are going to keep moving because if we settle down anywhere, we're going to end up getting captured by them, and we're not having it. So absolutely, I absolutely agree with that. The more settled you become, the greater chance you're going to have that kind of relationship. Even if members leave and they roam around, the main settled region becomes a central place for doing that kind of stuff. So I agree with that. I definitely agree with it. Mike Gould says it's also very typical in a setting where warring for resources is common, whether there is like a desert community with an oasis or a very clean water source is another reason. Of course, plant sources, things like that. Mining comes like if metallurgy starts becoming a norm, that starts to happen as well, where people start to remain a lot more settled. So I could see that happening. On the other hand, hunter gatherers are more geared towards genocide. And let's turn this back into gender roles. While people are moving, the gender roles are probably a lot more fluid, meaning like, it's not only men doing a thing and only women doing a thing, and we could care less about anything in between. But as people start to get more settled, maybe those divisions do spread out a bit. Hey, you women, you are going to be our breeding force for more people, while the males are the expendables, and they're going to go out and start the war, as opposed to moving away from hunting and going more towards assault and capture and resource taking and things like that. So maybe we start to see a lot more of those divisions, and maybe we could see roaming bands of only female groups, Amazons, who are trying to escape from we're going to force you into a specific role. Or you might see bands of men running out there because they've been kicked out, because the males in leadership are like, no, those women are ours. You are a rival. Go away, leave. Animals do that as well. Male animals leaving, especially predators. Male animals leaving so that they can create their own little prides of like felines and things. Wayne says slavery may be a touchy subject in our cultures, but if we're considering our game settings, historics, it would likely exist. It was human norm across all cultures from the beginning. Sure was for with fits and starts in between, right? Yep, killing everyone of a rival tribe is rarely done. Captives are almost always taken, and and since we are talking about gender and such, it's possible that maybe, and this could be a fallacy, that specific genders are known to have specific skill sets or resources or magical abilities within this world that we're creating. So maybe it's known that females are oracles. Now, that might be false, but maybe in a when they were tribal and they were moving around, uh, whoever was the oracle was there, and they could tell the future, or they could just mentally know what the weather's going to be, or where resources are. But when they settled down, maybe the women were like, shit, they're gonna fucking make us slaves. I know. What we'll do is we'll be the oracles, and we'll move our position or status up so that they don't relegate us into the slave status. Okay, so now that they're in this settled group, they're like, well, maybe all the women are oracles. Yeah, that's what happened. Et cetera, et cetera. Ooh, eunuchs. Ooh. Mentions make the slaves eunuchs to fit with today's theme. Yeah. Ooh, hadn't thought about the status of a eunuch as a if we can incorporate them into a third gender or an alternate gender, individuals that might have through choice choose to become a eunuch of sorts, whether chemically or you know actually mechanically speaking. Um, hmm, hmm. I like that. Now through force, ugh, but that's even done today on women. Oh my God. Um, mm, mm. I don't have a reference for that. Mike says historically, um, the Mignol, with Mike being up north, living in the baseball cap of the United States, says would the Mignol would only kill everyone in a tribe during times of war and only in extreme circumstances. Is because we would rather not war. It's so a warning. Oh yes, you by leaving people alive, it is a warning to other tribes of your power, your capabilities, and really, hey, this territory is ours. Go spread the word. Let everybody know this place is ours, and you need to maybe bring gifts in order to cross our territory, or to gain knowledge, or to gain our protection, or something of that nature. Mike says more commonly, militant invaders were massacred. Yep, gang of eunuchs. Gang of eunuchs call it a rubber band. Boom, 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 boom. We need to make T-shirts. All right, guys. So we've come to the end. Yes, of course. Today being Thursday, the third pillar of exploration. I know we talked far more about the second pillar, about the social interaction, but I think it would be pretty interesting to explore a world where we have our classic dangers, floods, and traveling through jungles and deserts, and frozen tundras and all this kind of stuff, layered on top of this social interactive nature, where the PCs are like, hey, we need help, or we're going through your territory, and then having to decipher, how do they act, what do they want, what are their agendas, and do we align with them? Hey, we don't agree with what they believe, but they sure do control a lot of territory, so we're going to have to hide you in our group or something, or whatever the case may be. uh, Mike Gould says gender may be a thing of faith too. Absolutely. Once one becomes a member of a sect, your gender no longer matters. You are not seen as a gender. You're a monk. Exactly. Exactly. Like, you may not be called male or female. You might be called. Your role becomes what you are, and that might lend itself to, like, for example, we do often relate certain roles with their sexual proclivities. Like, you might be a monk that must stay away from all sexual contact, or you have become a faith leader and you're a noble and you're allowed to have a harem. You are a female who is allowed to have a brood of men to lead your group, and or whatever the case might be. Like, there might be certain roles that you acquire, and also, again, with the eunuchs, through disease, through injury, through choice, there might be body modifications that force you out of one role into another one. Like the idea of, we've seen this in lots of historic contexts and even some intellectual properties, and it is a touchy subject, but women that can't give birth might shift one from one role to another, or men who are injured, or honestly they can't perform, might also be pushed into the same role as well. And the woman who can't give birth is just like, well, I'm going to be a hunter, and the guys are like, yeah, you're going to be a hunter with the rest of us. They may completely ignore it. It's a cultural switch in the head, click in the head, like, oh, we don't consider her female any longer. She's a hunter, and that's it. You know. Lastly, let's see. Zamar says, "Don't worry, I will keep trying to figure out how to fit gender into the third pillar. It may be impossible, but until every option is explored." Yeah, yeah, yeah. Dead Man says, in real life, nuns were a sect of religious persons who swore off all things feminine to serve the church. Again, going back to the where we talked previously about the law and wearing like black robes and a white wig to divorce yourself from the society. Religious garb often did that as well. Monks, not martial arts monks, but the exposed halo-headed monks and nuns of that time, I think, probably had a similar aspect to them, that it was a separation of their gender to become more aligned with their faith to friars. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, yes, thank you very much. Friars who were also actually who were known to be quite skilled at making producing various things like candles, cheeses, wines, breads, things like that. So yeah, oh, absolutely. Mike says, I have a sect of paladins in Thul called the Face. They wear silver androgynous masks. You are no longer a gender, you're a face of justice. Even, what was the movie? The Kingdom? There was it wasn't the movie wasn't very good, but in it there was an individual who was suffering from I believe it was leprosy, that wore like a silvered mask and their body was covered or something. And excuse me, in my mind, your comment about the people in your world of Thul reminds me of that. Air fryers are healthier. Floating around on levitating fly spells. Yeah. Fryers? I think we're back to food again. Yep. And even even Michael says Buddhist monks shave their heads to remove the concepts of gender and vanity. Yeah. So guys, thank you so much for being part of the show. Tomorrow we're going to talk gender tech. Yeah, we're getting back into Future Friday, and you guys are so silly. And we're gonna talk about transhumanism and technology. Like when technology gets to the point, fight fight fires with fryers. Oh, you guys are so bad. So we're going to talk about the room, like AIs and uploading brains and artificial bodies and robots and intelligence. And when technology makes gender specified anything a thing of the past, why does it still exist? And should it still exist? And where does it move to? Hint, I think it starts to move more towards faction and form more so than function. And can we and should we even leave those things in the past? We're going to talk about it tomorrow in our Future Friday series. So yeah, join me then. And as always, please, guys, like, share, subscribe, do all the good stuff. Tap 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 on the on uh, um, the the mechanism that allows the channel to be seen and heard and all that kind of stuff. Like Kylie says, yep, tomorrow sounds like a wish list for those of us transitioning. I love. Side note, you guys know the reason why I devote Future Friday to science fiction and transhumanism is the idea that today we're having arguments and political arguments, which is pretty ridiculous, about gender and gender politics and all this, which makes me wonder, like, why are we so obsessed with what other people do with their own genitalia? Like, I could care less. But whatever the case may be, I love the idea that technology could get to the point where all of this becomes useless. No matter where you stand, it becomes a faded thing in the background. It becomes a relic of the past that doesn't exist anymore. And so I'm very much of the mindset of like I I guess mentally I'm like, well, if the future says this is what it's going to be, why don't we just start living it today? Like I don't care what you look like or what you choose, just choose it, right? But we will. Yeah, like Pelora says, like, yep, pretty much Kylie. Yep, the ability to become who and what you want to be, if nothing at all, or everything, or whatever. It's not because of the artful alliteration, maybe. Even Deadman mentions that the character Burke from the Eclipse Phase Second Edition core book is a female AI who usually runs a gynoid morph. Yep, you can choose what kind of gendered body morph that you slide into with your cortical stack. Mm. Yeah. Wayne's like, humans are proven horrible at predicting the future. That's why I love to do it. Yeah, we are pretty horrible at it. The answer is punching down or projection, DBJ. Every argument I have ever heard and crushed. Yeah, it is. Like I have zero need to place someone below me to make myself feel better. It's like it doesn't threaten me. It's almost it's the argument of inviting more people to the table, that people are so scared that, oh my god, other people are going to get married and they're not like me. Oh my god, I'm like, that just makes, I don't know, wedding cakes cheaper. It gives us more options for dresses and tuxedos, maybe. I don't know. What's the matter? You're afraid that you won't be able to rent out that one space because there's more people. You know what I mean? Like, you can't. There's no argument for that. I don't understand it at all. I really don't. Anyway, the very few places on the internet, I hope this is a safe space for us to just be open and free. And of course, the thing is, we're in fictional spaces of tabletop RPGs where we get to dive in and delve into those aspects, and I love it so much. So, guys, have a great one. I will see you guys later. Co-host, take it easy. Thank you very much. Have a great one.